From the Dallas On Air studios in beautiful Dallas, Texas, this is Ful FILM Ment right here at DallasOnAir.com. And now here's your host, the Mega Bomber, PJ Dunn.
Welcome. We're happy to see you guys once again. It's finally starting to feel like spring here in Texas.
Right,
Mike? We've had some snow,
crazy.
some sleet, some rain, 70-degree weather, 40-degree weather, and then just kind of bouncing around. But today it's actually beautiful here in Dallas.
For all those not in Texas, that's just kind of normal for our kind of nonsense weather here. It's an old Texas saying, if you don't like the weather in Texas, wait 5 minutes. It'll change.
Yes, sir. So you almost have to lead with it because this week we literally didn't know whether to put on our Batman costumes to go see the movie or not, because it might be too cold or too hot, depending on what that day was that you chose to go see it. So
That's crazy. Yeah. The one day I saw it, it was like freeze. I had to wear like basically a big burqa. And then the next day I'm like wearing a t-shirt. It's, oh man, crazy.
Yeah. So welcome to Fulfillment. This is season 4 still. We're in episode 5. And today I have with me a great cast of characters. I can put an S on that because I have Horror Mike with me today.
Hey, it's good to be back again. It's always fun.
Yes, sir. Special contributor. And also that voice behind the camera and sometimes in front of it when we allow it. It's Kazak.
I am not the co-host you need, I'm the co-host you deserve. Welcome to DallasOnAir.com.
So with that now, kids, I think we've tipped our hat to tell you what we're going to talk about. And today we're going to give you mostly our reactions to this movie called The Batman. And I'm sure you've heard of it because it's been everywhere.
Yep.
And so we're going to look at the pros, the cons, and then maybe we'll kind of posture at the end of, so where do you go now after this sort of thing? But before we do that, we have a segment that we do called Just Seen It, where we talk about the latest films, or maybe it's just some TV shows that we've been watching. And that way you can get a good understanding of, are we really good at picking things to watch?
Yep.
Or do we watch a bunch of nonsense, which then you can totally, say bad things in the comment section because people do it anyway. So
Yeah, right?
We're used to that sort of thing.
You never read the comments.
Yeah, never read the comments and don't feed the trolls is what they say. But sometimes they say things and you just kind of want to get in there and sledgehammer them, but it usually doesn't happen. So, Mike, what have you been watching lately since we last saw you?
All right, perfect. The big one I saw over the weekend is the docu-series How to Be a Tyrant.
They have a documentary to try to tell you how to be one.
Yes.
We don't already know how to be a
Right?
tyrant. Okay.
That's one of the things I love about this documentary. So it's produced and narrated by Peter Dinklage, who his voice just sounds so different than what I'm used to on like Game of Thrones and other movies he's in. I guess he just has a big range. I didn't realize it was him. And what's genius about it is it discusses different tyrants throughout history. Obviously Hitler, Castro, all these Kim Jong-il. But it's framed as if it's an instructional guide on how to be a tyrant. So it's like rule number 382. You want to subjugate your people, but not subjugate them too bad. Not unlike this tyrant. And it does, the one criticism I did see that I think is fairly fair in it, it does, not humanize might be the wrong word, but it almost feels like it's almost making light of some of the things it did. But I felt, and that's fair, especially because I'm not living in many of these countries where these events happen, but I felt it's trying to make a bigger message that when these tyrants are happening, it's the same playbook every time. You should be seeing these things happening like from a mile away.
It's like a pattern.
It's a pattern. And I really liked the overall message. And I did notice it was trending. Things trend on Netflix for like a day and there's another thing. But I was like, oh, cool, it's trending. Like people are like watching this little docu-series. And I learned a lot about these different, I'm a pretty minor sized history buff. And there were some aspects of these tyrants whom I knew, but did not know about how they rose to power. A lot of the time you just find out like, oh crap, that's a big problem we need to deal with over there. So never think about like what leads to a normal person getting to that point. And I will end it with saying one of my favorite lines from it is they ask, it's a historian, what type of person can be a tyrant? And he says, like, what are you talking about? Anyone can be a tyrant when given enough power.
It's true.
And I was like, man, so it's good. I do recommend if you like docu-series, especially history, with the tiniest bit of humor into it. Yeah, How to Be a Tyrant. It's very good. I liked it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Watch that one.
No, that is, yeah. I mean, that's where we get the phrase. Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yes.
Right. So yeah, that's interesting though. I didn't know that was out there. So it was on. Was it on?
I'm sorry. This is a Netflix exclusive.
Okay.
Right, I forgot. Well, talk about weird sign of the times to tell which streaming service exclusive it is. Yeah, really good. But again, I love docuseries because I'm usually like drawing or working, so it's something I can just listen to, but also kind of absorb the information. So I watch a lot of docuseries.
No, that makes total sense.
And this is one of the top better ones. I really enjoyed how they did it.
How to be a tyrant. Okay. How about you, Kazek? What have you watched since we last talked?
Well, I got to tell you, I have been up to my ears in all con planning. I've been doing nothing but convention stuff, so haven't had a lot of time. The one thing that I did manage to catch, though, was the latest season of Disenchantment. Fulfillment. And it has been a long couple of weeks, man. All right. So again, this is also a Netflix exclusive. This is one of those cartoons where it's kind of fallen off and it's starting to wear out its welcome, but the writing in it just keeps me coming back every year. There's some really top-notch voice talent in there. John DiMaggio, Abby Jacobson, Eric Andre. It has like kind of little hits and misses, and this season was more miss than hit. But the writing just keeps me coming back. It's a continuing series. It's not like one of those like individual episodes. It's one of those continuing stories that just keeps on going back and back and back. Again, it's kind of a twisted take on fairy tales and fantasy and things like that. It's fun, but again, it's one of those shows that it's starting to wear, and you can kind of see the wheels start to fall off.
Yep.
It kind of, I guess, lacks a little something. This season kind of going a little darker than most, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, except when you kind of get into a Simpsons-style cartoon. But it gets me thinking about, the voice talent that's out there, especially with all the hubbub around Futurama coming back on Hulu.
Okay.
The bites with John DiMaggio and things like that. And just, how integral voice talent is to these series. And how, like I said, if you don't have these particular people, if you don't have these particular people, these particular times, it may not necessarily work. This season really kind of depended on the voice talent, and even that just kind of fell off because of the writing. I love the writing in the show, but this season was just kind of a miss. I think it's going to lose a lot of viewers on this one, and may not have them come back, which sucks because there's a lot to like in the series, but it's definitely not as strong as when it started out. Wow. I don't know what changed. I don't know if it was the right staff. I don't know if it was cast changes, but again, it's not as strong a series as it was. And I really hope that it sticks around at least for one more season, because I don't want it to close out like it did. But, Netflix, if they see, hey, we're not getting the numbers, it's gone. Yeah.
So I actually have a point. I actually am a big fan of all the Matt Groening shows. I just got caught up on this season also. So there's elements of, I think you're spot on. So for full disclosure, anyone who's, full disclosure, long whichever, but to explain to people who may not know Disenchantment, the equivalent would be is if Futurama was the kind of parody satire of the future, this is a parody satire of fantasy and that genre.
Yeah, it goes from fairy tales to steampunk to just kind of weird freak shows in between. It's fun.
It's fun. So what I think you might be feeling, this is something that's I think is going to be happening with most modern shows, and I think this is why Disney Plus and you're beginning to see Netflix is that what you're feeling with this season of Disenchantment is they're leaning towards a more episodic model than they had been before.
I was okay with that.
And I think this show is not bingeable. And if you look at shows like Boba Fett, which imagine had they dropped Boba Fett all at once, it would have just been kind of quickly forgotten. But people had time to think about it, think about what's going to come next, what's going to kind of absorb every bit of it. I think Disenchantment is suffering from that. Like if it came out weekly, I think it would be more memorable, because I was watching that and it was just like I was having trouble remembering things that happened 3 episodes ago and then referencing them as if I should have.
Yeah, there's a lot of callbacks on this show, and you really kind of have to go back and kind of remember stuff.
Mm-hmm.
and that does make it a little harder, especially for someone who's not like involved in the show.
Yeah. I suspect, based on the success of, I call it the Disney Plus model, but Amazon's been doing it. Everyone's been testing the waters to see if people want weekly shows. Disney Plus, everyone think about it. Every week, what's the movie? What's the thing everyone's talking about? They're talking about the new Disney Plus shows. Like, what's the new Disney Plus show? Shows just being dropped to be binged. That might be a thing of the past. I think people are realizing that you're missing that water cooler talk, and there is something to be said about not wanting to miss out on the conversation. Look at Lost. Every week, people were talking about, did you see what happened in the last episode of Lost? Oh my God, yeah, that callback just, and people just kept talking about it. So I think that's what you're feeling with Disenchantment, because I felt, taking a step back from this season, I personally felt it was as good as the other seasons. But I did notice there was more episodic content in this season. I think that might be it. It's too much. Like, I was just getting physically tired. I take breaks. Like, there's just so much story happening here. So I think that might be it. But it's a good show. I do recommend it, especially if you like Futurama and like The Simpsons.
I definitely wanted to get one more season, but I only want it to get one more season. I don't think it needs to go farther than season 5.
Yeah.
Just
Wow. Disenchantment. So it sounds like there's a little disenchantment with Disenchantment.
Yeah.
Sadly, and I like the show, but I think it's got issues, and I wish I could figure out what I'm feeling, but it's hard to put words to it. But
Yeah, that's actually a good point to think about now, because the way we watch TV, the way we watch movies is different now, because we have so much content coming from so many different channels, and people like to interact with channels, and so it's harder to do something where they don't have to interact with it. If it's just to sit there and just focus just your attention on this one thing, we're a lot more impatient, in these years than we were back in the day. Can you imagine when there was just 6 TV channels? You had to watch what was on there. But today we have so many options that we can watch literally anything we want, whether it's on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn. So you can be more selective, and you can be more picky about.
Although it is a little bit funny because there's so much now when someone actually watches a show that you like that isn't like one of the like Netflix trending, you're almost like, whoa, you watch that show too? I wasn't surprised when he said Disenchantment. I was like, you like Disenchantment too? I like Disenchantment. You got to get that like cool bond now. But it's too much. Humans can't absorb this much. Like that's a lot.
Yeah, and plus the other part of it is the more content there is out there, the quality's got to come down.
Yeah.
Right? Because the less that there's out there, you can then see the creativity of what the people were doing with what they had, like Lucas, when he's doing Star Wars for the first time. But you look at it now, and it's like, you kidding me? We got way better special effects than that. But still, people recognize the creativity, though, that he still had and everything else that happened to him during that. Today, because we have so much content, we can see what's bad and what's good after a while because there's so much of it. Because you'll notice the stuff you like to watch and the stuff you don't know.
Yeah.
So now what you've got is almost everybody is like a critic. You don't need Roger Ebert and them to talk about this, because I will watch this or I won't watch this. And then you start to know why you won't watch it.
Pretty quickly.
Right? And then you'll tell yourself, because I could be doing this instead. Where before it wasn't because I could be doing this instead. You had to watch Leave It to Beaver because that's all there was, back in the day.
A modern trend for myself, I'm real quick to cut off a movie halfway through. I used to be, when I was like 10 plus years ago, I'd be like, if it's bad, I'll finish it out. Maybe we'll have a good ending. I get 30 minutes in. I'm like, nope, out. Like, you can't, I'm out. You can't do it. There is too much on my queue. Everyone's queue. And that's definitely that's an idea for a show. I believe
totally is.
TV shows have gotten so stronger now that I'm like, I ain't got time for a lot of these movies that are just wasting my time. Because every streaming service wants you to come to their service, so they're really putting their all into these shows.
That certainly will be a topic. We will have to talk about that, because I think then the commercials play into it, and then of course there's just a whole bunch of things that will play into it. So I think it'd be a great thing to talk about. The film that I watched would be nothing that anyone here would probably watch, and probably you out there. And this is because this is a documentary about disc golf. It was called Disc Golf Matters. So this film was created by a guy named Matthew Robertson, by CLK Productions, and all he was trying to do was show the rise of disc golf, how it came from just these very humble beginnings, and how even the disc switched from being a frisbee, which is what people were calling it frisbee golf back then, to where it's actually a disc now. It's much more aerodynamic. It's made to go distance and do all these things. And so I watched this because I went down to the Disc Golf Pro Tour, which was in Waco, Texas, a week ago. So if you're wondering why we weren't on our normal time, that's part of it. And then, of course, Kazak was doing Alcon as well. But for me, I had to watch this because I love the history. So, like, you know, you talking about looking at the historical content. So I wanted to know, you know, what was the first disc and who threw it and what was the first type of organized games. And so this goes through all that, and it ends up to about 2015 where we're starting to see pros come out. We're starting to see sponsorships come out from different companies like Adidas and this sort of thing, who started sponsoring these guys just like ball golf. And so it was just interesting to see how this went from just simple people playing Frisbee by a beach or whatever. And then someone just had this great idea to say, hey, what if we did this like we were going through a course and we had to try to aim it into things and this sort of thing. So not a super spectacular shot one, but very modest and humbly shot one where you can get into it. It's almost the unique appeal of it is that you could tell it doesn't have all the greatest production in the world, but just seeing these people so excited by putting a disc up in the air and just watching the flight of a disc in the air and what it'll do.
There's something to be said about enthusiasm. And like, there's a documentary called Ghost Corps, which is just about fans of the movies Ghostbusters. And there's something to be said. Like, I can show a movie to someone who's probably never seen Ghostbusters, which who is that person anymore? But that enthusiasm aspect, that's what I was going to ask you. Where can I see it? Like, is it one I have to purchase? Like, where?
No, it's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube. So it's a YouTube documentary. Okay.
Yeah, it's a YouTube documentary. So once again, low budget again, and so it's on. It's not very long, so you can. It's like 30-something minutes, and it ends. What's great is it ends with the guys who are starting to make it into the sport that is today. Which is, while I was down there in Waco, I did get to see the first $10 million disc golfer. I got to watch him play live. That's Paul Macbeth from Long Beach, California, and that dude is ridiculously good. Wow. For you guys, the weather was absolutely horrible on Friday. It was 38 degrees with 20 miles per hour wind gusts, which made it feel even colder. And he was still putting it in the basket with all that crazy stuff on. And then, of course, they're wearing super heavy coats, which means that kind of restricts your deal. Yeah. He was just as butter with how he was putting and how he's throwing, as if the day was calm. That's how good this dude was.
You sold me on it, especially.
And he won the tournament.
Yum. You sold me on it, especially because most, I find, even when I don't care about a sport, I find it very entertaining listening to documentaries about the sport or about the history of the sport. I do not care about hockey, and I've seen so many hockey documentaries. I find them enthralling, and I was like, and I always fall for it. I'm like, wow, what a great documentary about hockey. I'm gonna go watch a game. 20 minutes in, I'm leaving now. This is very I love sports documentaries, so I'm definitely gonna be watching this one.
Well, definitely check it out. It's called Disc Golf Matters. Now, the one that's great, that's really, really great, and you can tell because it was made more in the more recent years, like 6 years ago. You got to watch The Greatness, and it's all about Paul Macbeth, the $10 million man, the first guy to get paid that kind of money playing disc golf. Now, there's a couple of others, but no one's topped him, so it's called The Greatness, and that's on him himself. And he's a very unique character because he was just a guy who was very introverted, and you don't need a whole bunch of friends to go play disc golf, and that's what he would do when other kids were hanging out playing like team sports. He was just getting better at putting from 50 feet, 60 feet, 70 feet, and then throwing distance and getting further and further. And just this guy's obsession. He is the Tom Brady of the sport. So the second one I'd watch after that is The Greatness, so you can see more about Paul.
YouTube also?
Also on YouTube, yeah.
You sell me on these. Like I said, I do quite like sports documentaries. One of my favorites series before it all went to ESPN was 30 for 30. 30 by 30. It's the ESPN
30 for 30.
30 for 30. Yeah.
30 for 30. Incredible. Like there were some sports and athletes I have never watched or cared about the sport ever. But again, it's so talented and there's such passion behind those docuseries. You're enthralled. Just
for
enthralled.
Sure.
So yeah, I love sports docs.
And that's the other side of the coin on all these streaming services, is that there is something out there for everyone. I mean, basically, Netflix can afford to throw anything on and see if it sticks, and they'll throw all the binge stuff because they want to keep you. But the thing is that the one good thing about it is that there is niche programming. There is something for someone out there who likes disc golf. There is something out there for someone who likes wrestling. There is something out there for someone who likes the Adventures of Edie and Mean. I don't know.
Cornhole, pickleball.
Exactly. I mean, and the ESPN got that like 82 channels somehow.
Yeah, yeah.
There is something out there for everybody.
See, and here's the last piece of this, and before we go into the next piece, boys and girls and everybody watching, is that, again, you're talking about these are human beings.
That's what
who
makes them so great. Yeah.
who
These are
said,
humans?
okay, you want me to throw a disc how far? And then I have to be perfectly accurate with trees and all kinds of things around me. And if you're a gamesman at anything, right, even movies, right, when you watch the best actors, they're the people who study everything about cops. They'll go on a ride-along, they'll do all this stuff because they want to get in and feel the human experience of doing something, because really what humans can do is pretty quite extraordinary. Like when we put our minds to it, people rise to levels, other people play, and then other people drop out.
Yep.
And that happens with almost any venture. So whether it's movie acting or whether it's playing a sport, they're very synonymous because it's about performance.
I agree.
And how do you connect with how you will perform? Right?
We love seeing people accomplish things that shouldn't be what we don't think humans should be able to accomplish. No, absolutely agree. That's why I say I like sports. Even when sports I could not care about.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and then move into our show topic of the day. That's what probably a lot of you are waiting for. So now we're going to talk about, with that wiki there, let's talk about our main topic. So the last show we were just talking about from a preview perspective what we thought the Batman needed to do to be good, how it could run into trouble. Well, now we've all seen it. So we're going to break this up into two sections. First, what we're going to do, because we are positive people here, which doesn't mean we can't have a critique just because you're positive, by the way. So that's a false narrative if they say positivity means you're always positive all the time. No, it doesn't. It just means mostly, in most situations when most people would give up, you choose to be positive. So we're going to start with our best moments from this film. And then for some of you,
on this one.
yes, for sure.
Actually, before we get into it, because
Yeah.
talk about your, because again, I think this is important.
Yes.
Talk about you going into the theater to see this film. I mean, what was your mindset? What was your what was your expectation going into it?
I love it.
I want to get into that first.
Okay, we'll do that first.
I think it kind of sets the timber.
Fair enough.
And I
Fair
think
enough.
All three of us are going to have very different
Yeah.
entries onto this one.
So my mindset going in was, first of all, I don't really care. I don't really need another Batman film, but I'm curious to see what would they do and how would they do it. And because I like Matt Reeves, because he directed one of the best Planet of the Apes movies ever in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, I'm like, okay, I can give this cachet. I'll go see it. So was I 100% like the nerd boy dude who was drooling all over himself and like, Batman? No, I wasn't him at all. That was the mindset that I had, and I only just needed to be entertained enough, and I needed to see how you were putting it together for me to feel good. And how was it for you, Mike? Your mindset going in?
Yeah, my mindset. Now, again, this is why I said I think we're going to be very uniquely favored. I work in a comic book shop. That's my full-time job. And I had many people. So because of No Way Home, Spider-Man No Way Home, I refuse to see superhero movies opening weekend. They're too crowded. Everyone's loud. Everyone applauds every little joke. It's very annoying to me.
Yes.
So I don't see opening weekend. So I accept it. I'm probably going to get a few spoilers. By the way, I want to add on. People are very chill about spoilers now. They'll politely ask, "Hey, have you seen the movie?" And if you haven't, people won't go into a billion spoilers.
Sure.
I've noticed that recently. But people were telling me how good this movie was. Everyone was telling me this movie's really good. This movie, you gotta see it, Mike. It's weird you work in a comic shop and haven't seen it yet. You gotta see this movie. And like Vega, I was very going in with the only expectation I went in is that Matt Reeves has a proven quality director. I really like Matt Reeves. So that's the only expectation. I'm usually pretty good about going blank slate with movies. So the only thing I went in with is Matt Reeves won't produce trash. But I will say everyone was overly hyping me going into it. So that's why my going into it was my little bubble I work in, people telling me. And these are hardcore Batman fans telling me this. So
For
keep
sure.
that in mind.
That's a great piece of context. And you, Kazak?
I kept this one off my radar intentionally because, again, I don't want to see another Batman film. I didn't. And I was getting mixed reactions from my circle of friends because all my movie friends loved it and all my comic book heads hated it.
Interesting.
That's it. I had the exact reverse, but continue.
That was the reaction that I was getting. I did not want to see this film. I did not want to see this film. And when I saw that, hey, we're going to spend an hour talking about this film, I was literally, I went in with the wrong attitude.
Okay.
So I have to apologize right now. I went into this film with the wrong attitude. That there was other stuff playing that I would love to go see. I would love to go and see Ty West X. I would have gone to go see Death of Nile. Lloyd Kaufman was in town doing Shakespeare's Shitstorm. I would have rather seen that than this.
Okay.
And
We're getting beat down.
I paid my money
Mhm.
and I went in. And like I said, I
Well,
went
hopefully you went to the matinee.
No, I went in for the full price,
Okay.
$15
Okay.
Cinemark XD
Ouch.
experience. I was.
Hope you didn't buy popcorn.
Oh, I bought the popcorn, the
Ouch.
M&Ms, the Coke.
Well, hopefully you didn't buy Twizzlers.
I went in for the beer. I went in for the beer
Oh, jeez.
because I knew what I was going to get into. I was trying to go in with the better mind. So, like, okay,
Yes.
I will accept this. I will try to enjoy this.
Yes.
I will try to get into the Batman. Because I went in with a blank slate, I kept it completely off my radar. I went in with no expectation whatsoever, other than, oh, it's another Batman film.
Okay.
Okay. And then this.
Okay.
And
Okay.
Very interesting.
This.
All right. Well, so then this is going to be great, folks, because what we're going to talk about is the best moments or our favorite moments, and then we're going to talk about the stuff that you could miss us with because it just didn't relate, or it broke down some logic somewhere, or you just asked why is this in the film anyway because it doesn't seem to advance or move the plot anyway. But we're going to start with the positives first because there are some positives here. And so for you, Mike, what were some things that you did enjoy
All right,
about
so I'll
this
start
film?
with my number 3.
Okay.
The sequence of because the one thing I will give this movie, when it builds, I argue, when it builds tension, it builds it very well. When
Okay.
it has a good setup and payoff. Keep this in mind. Put this in your notes, viewers, because I'm right now complimenting its setup and payoff because they do things that annoy me later. Things you set up in the first act should come into play in the second and third act. This is kind of like screenwriting, basic storytelling writing. Well, I genuinely love the setup, the threat of the Riddler, and the sequence of the DA. Was it the DA who had the bomb on his neck?
Mm-hmm.
The DA with the bomb on his neck with 3 minutes to answer these questions, these riddles. And you have Batman trying to help this guy, and you have the tension of you, the audience, trying to figure out what does this guy know that, that Riddler would be willing to kill for. And there's a moment in that scene that I loved when he's asking him who's the puppeteer. And this guy with a bomb on his neck is like, nah, I'm not going to tell you that. I'd rather just sit here and die, which builds the tension. It's like, this guy's about to die to keep this secret. Oh, man, where are we going with this? This is great.
Yeah.
That whole sequence and it has a lot of great moments, ignoring the fact that Batman took a point-blank explosion in the face
Yeah.
and just walked away. But
Yeah.
ignoring that, I argue the tension in that sequence just ramps up very well. And then it just kind of, we'll go into the other aspects of it later, but that's
Sure.
my number 3 for sure.
Okay. How about you, K-Zach?
Okay. So one of the positives about this film is that it has some actors making good, strong choices. The number one actor I thought in this film was John Turturro as Carmine Falcone.
Mm-hmm.
John Turturro is an actor who knows how to play his hand,
Mm-hmm.
when to overplay and when to underplay.
Okay.
You can see that in everything that he's done, from Barton Fink to Transformers. Everything that the guy has done, because he's not afraid of the big budget project.
Mm-hmm.
He's not afraid to put into it what he needs to.
Mm-hmm.
He understands. He's an actor who understands the economy of acting. John Turturro as Carmine Falcone really understates the role and goes into the rage when he needs to.
Yeah.
He really taps into the figure that needed to be Carmine Falcone to make him a respectable villain in this movie.
Yeah.
I liked what he did. I liked the choices that he made. I liked him in this role.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that was good. Complete full-on agreement. And so for me, watching the film, I will give the props here to thinking about how Batman in this film touches Gotham. And here's what I mean by that. I love the fact that throughout the movie, he thinks it's about vengeance. He thinks it's about just beating people up, and that's what the people need to see. But the problem is, even when he beats people up and saves people, the people that he saves are still afraid of him. right? So like in that first scene, or the gang is trying to knock out this guy, and Batman beats them all down, because we all saw it in the trailer. It was completely given away in the trailer what
Yeah, almost
happens
the
there,
entire fight.
right? And then when he walks up to the guy, and the guy's like, "Don't hurt me, don't hurt me." And that was such a great moment, a very simple moment that was never touched on before. And then when we see at the end of the movie, where Batman is seen helping people out of the rubbish that was created by the flood and all that stuff, and he's carrying people out to gurneys and helping them out there, just that shot of the cape flying backwards, and he's got someone in his arms, and he's carrying them to safety. And then when he sets her down in the gurney, now she's safe because she's in a gurney now, she reaches up and grabs his arm.
Yep.
Doesn't have to talk. They don't have to say anything. So it was just seeing that Gotham in this situation, showing how Batman was touched by Gotham and Gotham was touched by Batman.
Even little elements that he's realizing that he's kind of when the movie we'll touch on, it goes off the rails near the end, but it does kind of pick up near this point when he realizes, oh crap, I'm inspiring in the wrong way. Like you have the crazy guy screaming, "I am vengeance." He's like, oh crap, I've really messed up here.
Yep.
And to your point, it's a bit on the nose, it's very on the nose symbolism, but when people are afraid of him, when he's reaching to help the mayor, she doesn't reach for him. It's the kid. It's like that it's the you gotta extend a connection. I thought that was a great moment, and to your point, I agree 100%. I think they did a very good. It's not fair to the movie because The Dark Knight has a similar sequence with the boat scene. That's all you gotta say. That's how famous that scene is in The Dark Knight. But I do like there was an attempt made, and it's I think it's a pretty fair attempt. I think it's like, okay, you did good. I see what you're trying to do here. I think you did it pretty well. So I agree with that. That's a very good point on that one.
I thought that was wonderful. So what's another one for you, Mike?
All right, for my number 2, Man Alive, the introduction of the Batmobile.
Yeah.
I could taste. I'm cartoonishly cheap, but I did say if I go see this movie again, I would see the Dobley with the speakers on the chair and stuff. I would watch it just to see the Batmobile sequence again. I'd be willing to pay prices just to see up to that sequence and leave. This movie's way too long, but that Batmobile sequence, and so before this moment, I went and watched someone made a YouTube video of the introduction of every single Batmobile, and I can make a fair argument. I think this blows out every single introduction of the Batmobile. Like, I don't even think it's close. Like, the cinematography of Penguin realizing Batman's not there, and you just see that a lot of black voids in Gotham. That black void in the alleyway, you just hear that boom, 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 and I was just like, I could feel it. Like, I could just feel like this is horrifying. It almost felt like a horror movie. I was like, Penguin, you need to run, man. Like, what an incredible introduction of a very iconic vehicle. And clearly, whoever was on this production, I think they knew, to use a baseball analogy, I don't understand baseball. They threw the ball and they caught it. Like, they knew the Batmobile is one of the most iconic elements, if not the most iconic thing about Batman. And that is one thing I think they nailed in this film. This film does have some problems that we'll discuss. Ain't none of it's the Batmobile and the introduction of it, and the action sequence. Wasn't incredibly well choreographed. A little bit kinetic and a little bit chaotic, but just the sound. Just talk about everything working in great motion. I'm like, these guys got it, man. Like, so that's my number 2 for sure.
I totally tend to agree, and I will say more when I get to my second one.
No,
KZ?
go ahead and take it.
You want me to go ahead?
You can have mine.
Okay. So yes. So here's, ladies and gentlemen, here's how you understand how cinematography and sound design work. If you look at the Oscars, you'll notice there's an Oscar for sound design, and there's also one for cinematography. Right? They're separate for a reason. So, but they both have the same function.
Yep.
So when you see the Batmobile turned on for the first time, first of all, number one, I love the idea because it's a muscle car. For those who maybe aren't into cars as much, that's basically a 68 Dodge Charger. That's what that thing is, with the back end cut out and the engine put into it. So with muscle cars, if you grew up, like probably Kazak and I did, when you saw muscle cars on the street, they were loud, they were rumbly, they were aggressive, and that's why dudes loved them, because this car sounds mean. It sounds like it could go do something. So I love the fact that they focused on it's a muscle car, and by the way, it's going to sound like a muscle car. And then when you hear the muscly, if you will, of this car, you're like, okay. So now this is sound design taken to the nth degree on this, which is the same thing Ford versus Ferrari did, which it was nominated for sound design, Ford versus Ferrari. And so I love the fact that Matt Reeves, maybe you watched that movie and saw what they did there and said here, what James Mangold did, but here they said, no, that's the element of the car. It's not just that it needs to look fast. It needs to sound rumble tumble.
Yep.
It needs to sound like that engine is a monster itself. And that's why you do the sound. And so when he takes off and he does everything he does, you just love that whole scene. The only, again, I know we're going to get to the negatives, but the thing I wish they would have done is not put this in the trailer, because they literally put the end of that whole scene in the trailer.
Which is tragic.
Rather than just the pieces in between.
Yeah, which is tragic, because like I heard him, like hardcore Batman was like, well, yeah, that's what an amazing, that looks awesome. That's an awesome shot, which it is. But I'll just say, like, imagine how much more awesome it would have been if you take a cue from Spider-Man No Way Home and you just didn't show that in the trailer, and just people would have lost their minds in the trailer, like that sequence. I still kind of lost it, and I knew it was coming. Like, an element of surprise is kind of being lost in cinema. Like, it feels like they have to, and I think some movies you do have to show, like, this is what we can do. Mm-hmm. This is Batman, dude. Spider-Man just proved to you ain't got to show a billion things in your trailer to get people to come see it. Batman, you could just put up a poster with the Batman logo and people would have just shown up.
For sure.
You're correct. That is a very tragic thing of this movie, because that's such an amazing sequence. I would have liked to have just had it completely fresh-eyed to it. And part of that is on me, because I could have just not watched the trailers. But I mean, the trailers were everywhere. I'd be shocked if somebody was able to avoid everything.
I did. I avoided it completely.
Yes, you did.
You got one.
You got one. You got one.
You got
one.
It is possible.
Yes,
but
yes.
that trailer was freaking every YouTube, like video. So,
well, y'all run it in the store, so you can't.
Oh
not
yeah,
see
and then
it
we have a playlist of movie trails. There was no way I was gonna avoid it.
Right, and that's the thing, is that your algorithm, it was going to hit. For me, it did. For me, it didn't. It deliberately stayed off my radar. I wasn't looking for any spoilers, anything on it, so it completely stayed off my radar, which is an interesting aspect of the social media. The fact that I know nothing about this film, and it didn't hit me at all.
Yeah, and see, I'm in the middle of both of you, because I watched the one trailer, but I didn't watch every trailer that they released, because I hate that crap when as they get closer to the movie, they keep releasing more and more and more and more. And it's like, no, it's the opposite.
Here's a full clip from the movie. Like, here's a 5-minute clip.
And here's so and so on, late night with one of the talk show hosts, and he shows a scene just so he can show you something, and it's another scene that you hadn't seen that's not from the trailer. And it's just like, listen, you almost are piecemealing this whole movie for us, and we're not dumb people. We've seen a lot of these movies. We understand. We've read the comic books. It isn't hard for us to piece together these movies when you keep giving away these clues. It's supposed to be the opposite. You're supposed to show just a taste to where now in our heads we imagine things. Oh my gosh. But instead they're going, we're so afraid people won't go, so we better show Penguin. We better show Batman beating up a bunch of people. We better show the Batmobile itself doing some really great stuff. And it's like, but not to that degree. It just needs to be just a taste and then step away. But they don't. They just end up doing that. So yeah, that's one of those things. But Kazak, what's another good point for you of the film that you appreciate?
The only other part, because like I said, we usually go in 3 parts in this, and I only got 2 in this one, because I really want to kind of get into the other half of it.
I'm with you.
Jeffrey Wright as Commissioner Gordon.
Yeah.
I thought the thing about the actors in this movie is that they nail their beats every time.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I can say, is that the actors in this movie made strong acting choices. Jeffrey Wright was a good casting choice. His pacing, his delivery, the way that he interacts with Pattinson, the way he kind of commands a scene. I would have loved to have seen the crime movie Commissioner Gordon versus Carmine Falcone.
Yes.
I would have been great with that film. I didn't need an hour and a half of the Batman. Mm-hmm. I would have seen the crime movie that went on around this movie.
For sure.
And I think
that's where I landed.
I wouldn't be surprised, because we're getting that Arkham Asylum Gotham PD show where it's supposed to be like, oh, this is about the cops. I think even they realize. I think they kind of felt like we could probably make a show on this. There's a lot of good. That's something I've said for years. I would say maybe 90% of superhero movies are usually well casted. It's always a script that fails these movies. Like, it's always a script. And I agree with him 100%. I thought the cast was great. I have no real issues with the cast.
And Jeffrey Wright specifically as Gordon, like I said, I like a lot of the stuff that this guy does.
Yeah.
He's an interesting actor. He's got great delivery. He's good to watch on screen. He can deliver comedy. He can deliver drama. He can deliver. I'm willing to watch this guy on film because he's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's got a wide base of different character types that he's played, which has served him to this point.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people didn't know of him, and some people were saying, "Oh, I just found out about him." It's like, really? You didn't see Shaft, where he was a great villain? He was Joe Peoples in Shaft. He was in The French Dispatch I saw with UK Zach. He was in Basquiat.
Hunger Games, Westworld,
Yes.
all that stuff.
He's been in a bunch of stuff.
I'm most familiar with him as a voice actor in Westworld.
Mm-hmm.
He's great, but I've seen him throughout for years. I'm just saying those are the two where I really was like, oh, this guy's good. Hell, he's the voice actor. Fun little fact about it, I'm not sure, on HBO Max they have Batman Radio Adventures, which are all like audio adventures. He's Batman, and Jeffrey Wright is Batman in those radio plays. He's great. Like, he's just a good actor, and that kind of goes without saying nowadays with superhero movies. They tend to cast very well because every actor wants to be in a superhero movie because it's a fairly safe, easy paycheck. So they tend to draw a lot of good actors into it. So, no, I agree with you. Jeffrey Wright, two thumbs up on him.
So let's get to our last goods so that we can spend the time what we need to
On
get
the
into
next
main
one,
bit. Yeah. So what's your number one favorite thing about the film?
The sequence, I love the storytelling use of reincorporation. I love the sequence of him getting into the Iceberg Lounge 3 different times. So the first time, he basically was like, you know who I am? And he just beats his way into the club. That's a very un-Batman way to handle things. He just wastes a lot of time. Penguin ends up breaking up the fight. Second time, it's a little bit more tactful with Bruce Wayne. He's like, you know who I am? You know, he kind of gets in, smoothes his way to what he needs. And the third time, he's learned where the guy opens the door, he's already in. It's like now he's learning to be Batman more. It's like, oh, your reincorporation. That's a good thing. We can see the character, even the Batman is growing and learning as a character. I really enjoyed that. It's a small sequence, but it shows you that there was care thought into a large portion of the script, because a lot of movies wouldn't even had something so small. What can be viewed as a joke, but it has a bigger implications of the character arc of the character being represented with him just entering in this club 3 different times. That's my probably not might be my favorite moment, but it's one of. I think all 3 of my favorite moments are all kind of even.
Okay.
I kind of almost arbitrarily put them in an order.
Okay.
But I think they're all pretty up there for me.
Yeah, I would say that my favorite part, and then we'll get to our second part here, which is I know what most people want to pay attention to for sure, because we've already heard everybody glowing over it.
Yeah.
But I would just say again, I'll go back to the first act. I think that the first act was a great introduction to showing us this world. The world building was great in the sense that it said this is what Gotham looks like. This is the people. They're afraid of Batman. Batman's actually something people fear whenever they see that thing go up. The criminals know, they better start looking around because he could be anywhere. So I like that whole boogeyman thing, which is what they were trying to go for anyway. I think that scene is very iconic where the guy's spray painting and doing some bad stuff, and the can rolls away from him and rolls into the darkness, and he's afraid to go get that can back because Batman might be in there. So I thought all the cues and the clues and the context to set this world up, I thought that was fantastic. Yeah. And I was really into it. Showing the the Riddler, showing Paul Dano as somebody who's, he's crazy, and he goes in and he kills some people and he does some crazy stuff right off the bat. And he's using duct tape to do it. And you're wondering, well, so what's the deal with duct tape and all this other stuff? So I thought that was very intriguing. It had me paying attention, and I wasn't checking my watch yet. So
I would love to rewatch all the openings of the Batman movies. There's a good argument to be made. This is probably the second best opening for a Batman film. Like that opening 30 minutes is pretty iconic. Obvious Dark Knight has the best with that bank heist.
The Joker
but
bank heist, yeah.
That's number one. That's not even in range. But I think a close second is this opening.
For sure.
All the way up to when he fights the gang. Like, that was pressure, man. I was like, oh man, this is good. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that would be that. So ladies and gentlemen, now let's switch. Now I have to say this to get you ready. Trigger warning for you, because we're people who, just because we can see the flaws in the film doesn't mean we're haters. It just means that when we're looking at the film, we're not using a fanboy glasses to cloud our judgment on it. We're looking at it as a work of fiction that's art that people have put performances into. So we're going to look at it from that perspective. We're going to look at the storytelling and the screenplay and just, did the scene land and did it not? So just telling you up front, if you're a person who sees no flaws with this film, you're about to get triggered. If you're somebody who's seen enough movies, you should be able to say, okay, well, that's not how I saw that. I could still see how some people could get it, and that should be okay. So with that,
All right, I can we also safely say that this might go into spoiler territory?
yeah,
Oh,
well, we are going
So-
to spoiler territory.
okay,
we
so-
spoiler. We
okay,
spoiler.
so-
baby.
for that,
Okay,
right?
so
Yeah, it's
okay,
third,
so
this is week 3. If you ain't
Yeah.
seen it by now, you're probably not going to see it.
exactly, just giving our audiences a chance.
That's fine.
Last,
That's
last
fine.
shot.
Thank you for doing that. We appreciate it.
This is your spoiler warning. If you haven't seen the film yet, you might want to put it aside. Check us back next week, because we'll be back next week with another episode. But like I said, this is your opportunity. So 3, 2, 1, spoiler zone. Okay.
Love it, love it, love it. All right, so Mike,
All right,
what
so
didn't
actually,
work for you, man?
I actually have to add one. I actually have
That's fine.
3, so I'm going to add one. Would be my third. I'm torn on this. I'm the big comic book guy here. I read all the Batman. I love it. There is a weird love of fan service in this, and just bringing in stuff almost haphazardly from the comics. This is going to touch on to one of your points, and I'll bring it up when you get to it. But there are plot points that are just, they only mean things if you read the comics, and they don't progress the story. I'm a big proponent of it when it comes to movies. TV shows, I think there's a lot more leeway of just add-on stuff that you can have subplots and stuff. But movies, I mean, you only have a limited time to tell your story. Cut the stuff that isn't focusing on the story or building the characters, and they have to take time to. It's like, don't you know what that is? Isn't that a reference to the movie? Like when he injects himself with like what looks to be adrenaline, that's venom. That's like what Bane uses from the comics.
Yeah.
That comes out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
And that's bad writing. Like if you're that's just why Chekhov's laser reason. You should have set that up earlier. You can't just have him use something that affects the story out of nowhere. That's a reference to the comic books. That's bad writing. Like I like your movie, but that's just actual bad screenwriting.
Yeah.
And that a lot of the bad elements of the movie for me many of the bad elements come from their clear passion of the comics. But they should have had someone who probably doesn't know the comics, who probably can look back and say, hey, that point doesn't make sense, or take that part out. There should have been someone like that. So that's going to be my 3. There's just too much love of the comics. Boy, that sounds weird. If I'd heard myself a week ago, I'd have been like, you're a crazy person. After seeing it, it's like, man, you got to build your own legacy. Stop taking from the comics and just throwing it in there haphazardly.
Yeah, just because you know the effect it will be on some of the fandom,
Agreed.
but it won't be most of the people that are seeing that.
Yeah, the film writer's saying, "Hey, I know my stuff, and here's how I prove it."
Yeah.
It was a beat
Like
down.
UK, Zach?
Okay. No one is likable in this film.
Ooh.
What did I say last
Yep.
show?
Yep.
You have to have the Batman has to be fun. There is nothing fun in this film. Does everything have to be directed by David frickin' Fincher? No. The actors made strong choices.
Yes.
They did the best with what they had.
Yes.
But no one in this film is likable. There's no heart to the film.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, with like the exception of maybe like the kid who like shows up and is like kind of like the center of Bruce Wayne's focal soft point. Just there's no one likable in the film. Villains, a smart villain, good. I'll get behind a smart villain. I didn't, but there's nothing like about the Riddler that you're not supposed to like Carmine Falcone. You're not. John Turturro does a great chilling point. But I mean, I don't like Robert Pattinson. I didn't like Robert Pattinson as Bruce Wayne. I didn't like him as Batman. Neither of them shut off. Andy Serkis, supposed to be the emotional heart of Batman. Didn't like him.
Right.
I love Zoe Kravitz in and of herself. She's charming. But in this, there's no chemistry. There's nothing likable about this cast. And for 3 hours, that's hard.
Yeah.
That is a hard draw. No one is likable. There's no fun in the film. I will give you this: the opening is very strong
Yes.
and sets a tone, but it's a tone poem for 3 hours, and it just falls flat. Because it's not likable. There's no light in the end of it, and it becomes boring. And that's the one thing a
Interesting.
Batman film should never be is boring.
That's interesting.
I will say I like Jeffrey Wright, but to his point, he's nowhere near. He doesn't have him and Alfred don't have the screen time. I would argue.
Yeah.
They. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm agreeing.
I
Yeah.
did like Jeffrey Wright, but to your point, like I can't see myself like I don't really. I like Jeffrey Wright, and I like this take on Batman. But he's right. There's like no one, like even Catwoman, who seems to be was supposed to be the likable character. I was like, no, she's kind of. Well, there's nothing to like.
There's
Just
no
her
motivation.
character.
Yes.
There's no motivation.
Yeah, we don't even know why she cares so much about this Russian model
Bingo.
girl who, right? They don't even build up.
I'm okay with her picking up strays, quote unquote. There's your explanation. That was all the exposition that you got.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was kind of like, but it was anticlimactic though, because once they showed the dead girl in the car, then what happened?
What happens? Yep.
Oh, well, I guess she's gonna have a funeral. She doesn't even stick around, see the person's family, go into the funeral. There's nothing to show that there's a connection other than that this is a plot point. The reason why she's in that club to stay close, which this segues into my number 3, which is what I hated here was the Selena Kyle parent reveal. The whole idea that she has to be related to Falcone.
Yep.
I'm like, okay, if you do that, how did that push the story forward? Was that compelling? Did people go, oh my God, what a switch? I would have never have guessed that.
There's no tie.
Wow. Yeah.
And that goes. So I wanted to touch on that point. That goes back to my point. That is directly from the comics.
Yep.
And it was a small plot point in the comics that was handled in a random Catwoman book. Not random, but it was a pretty major Catwoman book. But it's just like, had you cut that, nothing would have changed because she would have the motivation to kill him because her friend is dead and she was brutally murdered. And you brought up a very good point because I had to bring that up to somebody. They were like, I was like, what's Catwoman's motivation?
Yeah.
Well, because of her friend. She went very hard for someone who was just a roommate. I don't know why she cared so heavily about her.
Yeah.
And then they incorporated that plot point to which that's from the comics, people. Like that is from the comics, but it adds nothing to the story. It's just like, well, where did that come from? Why didn't you just have that be her motivation? Why is the friend even I think have her motivation be she's trying to get to Falcone to find out about her mother and to kill Falcone for maybe killing her mother. Woo, that was a weird decision on the filmmaker's part.
Yeah, and see, that
Very
doesn't
strange
work.
decision.
And I would say that still doesn't work because she's a cat burglar. She's not a murderer or somebody who looks to seek
Right.
vengeance. She's somebody who is adept at sneaking into rich people's houses and taking what she wants. And then maybe doing it for something that she thinks is an altruistic motive, like saving the strays on the streets, this sort of thing, right? But we don't get that. We get that, you know, here she is. She's working at this club. She's trying to get close. She's almost her own detective to a degree because she's trying to stay close to Falcone so she can get what she needs to get when she needs to get it. So there's a whole nother story there about all that. And the way you tie that together is by making them father and daughter, to which, like I said, again, at that point, I thought, oh, okay, but why should I care? And then with her and Batman,
Yep.
it's like, okay, we've seen this a million times. Whenever Catwoman's in the film, there's always going to be this flirty thing between her and Batman that'll never work out. So why do I want to see yet again? This is almost like the Pearls now. Because she's like, yeah, I kind of like you, but I'm going to go to another town because Gotham's effed. You can still be saved. It can't, jerk. I'm leaving. You go ahead. And so it's like none of that's compelling. Like
There's no chemistry. There's always supposed to be chemistry between Catwoman and Batman, and this way misses the
I felt they were more partners than anything. Like I did buy the chemistry of them being like work partners. Like actually, I felt like they were like a Batman and Robin. So
For sure.
when she kisses him, I was almost like, oh, okay, like, that's almost out of nowhere. Y'all seem to work very well like as a duo. Which I almost thought they were going that direction. They were just going to drop that they even have a relationship, you know. But they weren't. Well, no, because of
No.
well, no. Hear me. This is what I mean is in the sense of they don't have very strong chemistry. I thought that was a purposeful point of the filmmakers doing that. They're like, oh, we're not doing
That's
this.
just bad writing.
I agree
bad
now.
writing.
It's just
Yeah.
bad
Yeah.
writing.
But that's what I thought watching the movie. It's like, oh, this is where we're going.
No.
Like I said, man, they have a weird adherence to that comic book. It's it really drags the movie down.
And this is the problem with taking things out and trying to homage them, thinking that you're being cool, which is really just fan service, is when you get to a level, and this is what the sequels showed us, when they just homage the shit out of everything. And when you do that, at some point, the best part of your movie is the fact that you could recall something from another movie that was great, and that's your claim to fame. You clearly don't understand what filmmaking is really about. What they're supposed to do is take this, like Nolan, this is why I'll argue with any one of them about this. Nolan said, yeah, I know Batman's more of a detective, but I want to ground him in reality and say, how would he function in our world and this sort of thing, and that's why I'm going to stay away from the more fantastic characters and kind of do it this way, because I'm trying to ground it into some of the elements that are already scary that we already deal with. That was his choice, and he talked to other people about that first, and eventually, because it bothered Christopher Nolan, and he said, and they just told him, no, Chris, you go make your film, brother. Yeah. And see what happens when he went and made his film, like the way George Lucas went and made his film, it's better. But when you find yourself trying to homage other great stuff, then you're going to be looking for ways to slip it in, which then pulls the movie different directions, throws off the pace, and maybe the tone, and perhaps even the length of the film. And that's what we're seeing now.
Yeah. No,
All right,
for sure.
we got to get into the next points, man.
Gotcha.
We're running out of time.
So next, for me, Thomas Wayne subplot.
Yep.
What I say about everything has to be towards the story. You tell me honestly, viewers who will love this film, if I were to cut the Thomas Wayne subplot out of it, that he may have been working with gangsters, all that stuff, just cut it. Does that affect the story where he has to then go see Alfred, where Alfred just says, nah, that dude was lying. Oh, okay, thank you. What? Again, by the way, another reference to something. That's a reference to the video game. Why even have that? That made me so annoyed. I was like, that's just 15 minutes of your too long movie just wasted to not only have Turturro give that great speech about Tom Wayne. I give him that. That was a great. I was like, whoa, this is pretty dreading. We're about to go in some new territory. And then you get to, no, I didn't. That dude just lied. Dun, 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 dun. Why'd you do that?
Yeah.
There you go. I'll quickly, that's my plot point on that. Again, too adhered to the comics. Continue.
Absolutely. I love it. Kazak?
That score. Maybe I'm spoiled by Danny Elfman. Maybe I'm spoiled by Hans Zimmer. But you know what doesn't intimidate me in the Batman film? The soundtrack that plays in the background when you shop at Hot Topic. I just the guitar picking, the incidental music when like the Batmobile rolls in. Just no, there is nothing to. The Batman score should overwhelm me. It really should. And maybe I am spoiled by it, but this was tone deaf, completely just the antithesis of what a Batman movie should be for me.
Yes.
And like I said, maybe I'm just going with my own biases. And like I said,
I
have friends who love scores and things like that who are arguing with me on this, and just like, no, there is nothing in this score that intimidates or impresses me. For nothing.
I will only give the mildest of pushback, because I think I know exactly where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I can see myself back when I was buying more music, like albums and stuff.
Yeah.
I did not like the soundtrack, but I actually liked the score. But the soundtrack choices were very strange to me for what it was. That one I agree with you on, but I do like overall this Batman theme and some of the just traditional score choices. But for the most part, I'm meeting you halfway on that one. Like, I see where you're coming from.
And I mean, and you like the club entrances? I hated them because basically I was walking into 1992 Strange Days. That's when we go right into the techno. It's like, oh God, I've seen this movie before. I'm now instantly taken out of it.
That's fair. I do disagree, but I do see that point. You that's a good point. No, that's fair.
Yeah, and that's going to happen, right? Not everybody's going to like everything, and so that makes sense. So the thing for me was, I'll just be real quick so we can get to it. The runtime again. I'm sorry. If you're a true artist, you should understand that editing is also a form of art.
Yes, dude.
And to me, the idea that this was 4 hours, maybe 4.5 hours, and you cut it down to 3, and you left it like this and thought this was okay, I'm sorry, but the runtime, way too long. It's not an economical thing to do either. When people want to go back and try to see this film again, they have to make it a 4.5 hour day just to try to go see this thing. I don't think the runtime helped it. And mainly because, again, the homaging, because I have to try to bring up stuff that happened in the comic book and then try to explain some things because I didn't set up some things in the front. I just gave you all action and all intrigue, and now I have to slow the film down in the second half to try to make it make sense. And then I capture the bad guy, capture all these things in the second half, at the end of the second half, or the second, act, to now I have a whole nother third act to see a whole nother plot part that feels tacked on. So I would say that whole idea of the transition from the second act into the third was really confusing to me.
Yes.
And then that's the first time I looked down at my watch and I realized I still had 45 minutes to go, even though the Riddler was in jail and Falcone was shot.
Yeah, here's the thing, is that if this had been broken up into a 6-part miniseries on Netflix or Hulu or Disney Plus or something like that, it would have been fine.
Agreed.
It really would have been fine.
Agreed.
Yes. 100%.
And so this is the question that it leaves me with. Has Hollywood forgotten how to write a movie?
Yeah.
Because we're now writing a 6-part miniseries and we're trying to get it all on one shot in one theater on one day. Because we've been so obsessed with the binge culture, like we started the show with, how we become so obsessed with the binge culture that now every movie is going to become a binge watch.
It's not the first time I've heard most people say this was like watching a 3-part miniseries all at once, and no breaks. And I agree. It's. I think that really annoys me. It's so easily editable. That's what I mean. I'm like, you don't have to be some editing genius like the guy who did Lord of the Rings. Holy crap, did that guy have to pick and choose. But you look at this movie, I'm like, cut. You're 2 hours now. Easy 2-hour movie. 2.5 if you absolutely have to have some references. That's really annoying.
I think you can go 2.5 because Nolan is gone for long movies and was able to do it. So I think 2.5 hours would have been fair.
Yeah.
If you're cutting down from 4.5 hours, but 3, I don't think that's a good compromise.
Yeah.
What's another one for you, Mike?
All right, my number one is one scene, and this is where it all started falling apart. And this is, I think, the beginning from the second into the third act. That device that was used to kill the mayor, the current mayor at the beginning of the movie. That's like a carpet thing, like thing for carpets. So Batman does not know what it is. Literally no one knows what it is. Batman randomly is in a room with a random cop who just happens to randomly have a father. I'm stressing how random this is. Who just happens to be someone who works on carpets, who just happens to know what that device is. What in the world? When this movie up to this point, that first act is all about setup, payoff. They set up someone has knowledge. That knowledge is paid off earlier. Like they set up this for just a random. It felt like the screenwriters didn't know how Batman would know what that device was. So we'll just have that cop just randomly in our room and just tell the information to the character. That's horrible writing. Yeah. That is that scene is in my mind going to be meme to death up there with like how bad the CG was on Black Panther's final fight.
Right.
That sequence is going to go down as a testament to probably one of the worst writing bits I've probably seen in a modern superhero movie, for a character just come in out of nowhere and tell you, here's the answer. Goodbye. I'm leaving now. Whoa. I was shocked. I was genuinely shocked.
That was crazy, but it's just as crazy to the convenience of Selena Kyle just happening to be right there by that whole stadium that they're in, that Batman's already doing stuff after she just left earlier and said, I'm leaving town. Batman's been already inside of this sports auditorium doing things, and she just happens to be right at the intersection where the water is starting to come in so that she can't leave, so she has to go into the sports store where they were, and she left way earlier than that. But just the idea that she's like, I'm just riding, hey, you better come in here, ma'am. There's a lot of water everywhere. Okay. And look who's here, Batman and some other guys dressed up like
man. Even that didn't even bother. That was the beginning where everything started unraveling. Because I was just like, wow, what a weird scene to just randomly have in this movie that's been pretty strong up to this point. And then it just started all unraveling from that point on. That 15 minutes for me, from that point to when he cuts the wire on the electricity, it borders on trash for me. It really isn't very good filmmaking compared to how good that first act is.
Yeah.
It's really weird. That really bugged me. So there you go. That's my my number one worst scene, because it's the beginning of a string of bad scenes for me.
For sure. And Kazak, final word on that before we move into shout-outs?
82 Lord of the Rings endings. There's an off-ramp. Take it. There's an off-ramp. Take it. Because not only do we have runtime of 3 hours, but it's not even an interesting 3 hours. It's an interesting maybe hour and a half, maybe even 2 hour crime drama that they've stretched into 3 endings by not knowing where to stop.
Mhm.
Where you can stop the movie here. No, it's fine. Okay, we'll wrap it up. And I mean, I know that when I'm going in and watching half an hour of previews, and I know I've got 3 hours to go on the film, I am looking at my clock. I am looking at my cell phone, and I hate to be that guy in the theater who's looking at his cell phone to find the time, but oh God, I wanted the off ramp. I wanted this movie to stop. I wanted you to finish up and tell me where I'm at.
Mhm.
And just no, there's no off ramp. There's no off ramp. And then even in the end credits, because we're now trained to stick around for the whole thing to catch maybe a glimpse of what's coming next, and you get that, like, there's no off ramp, because even if you go into the where that little flash of the web page goes, there's a whole other rabbit hole of just more stuff, and there's no off ramp. Take the hint. Stop the film. You can stop being clever. It's okay. Stop being clever. Stop eking this out. Because when you've got 3 hours of boring crime drama, you want just the ride to stop.
Yeah, well, ladies and gentlemen, again, these are just some of the ideas that were even more we just didn't have the time to get into, but we can meet you in the comments and talk more about that. Did you agree?
Sure.
Did you disagree? Is Kazak crazy? Is Mike crazy? Am I crazy? It's all good if you put it in there, because Prince said let's go crazy, so I think that'll be okay. So let's jump into our shout outs. And so, Mike, who are you shouting out to?
Hey, usual, my mom, dad. Hey, my dad tries to watch every episode I'm on.
That's awesome.
Keith's Comics, my manager, friend, Jesus, good to see you again. And my coworker, Garrett, I think he'll be watching today. So how's it going, Garrett?
That's awesome. That is awesome. You, Kazak?
I do want to go ahead and shout out all our family here at Dallas on Air. I do want to go ahead and shout out the guy who alternates with us, Cole Houston, friend of the show. Like I said, his dad's not feeling really well. We were supposed to tape episodes of Fulfillment and Rantcore today. We were supposed to tape episodes of Rantcore and Isle of Toys today. We didn't get to that. Hopefully, we're going to get to it next week. But we do want to go ahead and shout out Cole. Hope his dad gets better. But I do want to go ahead and also shout out all the other shows here on DallasOnAir.com, including Fan and Wife, including Figments and Explain Mysteries podcast. Check out Best for Business. Check out the camp. Check out all the good stuff here on DallasOnAir.com. I know we've got a lot of great stuff coming up later today. I know we've got more shows coming in, and of course, Jedi and Kat giving us a home here every Sunday. So, guys, thank you for letting us be here, and stay tuned to DallasOnAir.com for more stuff.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Brandy and Barry Austin, Sean Presley, Lauren Wiedauer, Tristan Fraser, Harry Thomas, Prim, who's also a YouTuber, Troy Ross, Daniel Meza, really good friend, Freddie, Eddie Medina, Cole Houston, as you mentioned before, Stephanie Crane, and of course, the film samurai himself. And so with that, this is the Fulfillment Crew saying we're out, peace, and we'll see you next week, actually.
Fun, yes.
Yep, Oscar talk. Oscar Dad.
Oscar Isaac talk.